That's how we're going to turn around the mess the Prime Minister has created in 8 years. Let us quickly touch upon that mess. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, housing costs have doubled. This is after he promised that those housing costs would go down. In fact, they rose 40% faster than incomes. The worst gap in the G7 by far, the second worst among all 40 OECD nations, twice as bad as the OECD average, with roughly a quarter of OECD countries actually seeing housing affordability improve over the last 8 years. Here in Canada, under this Prime Minister, we have seen them worsen at the fastest rate in the entire G7. He has created a situation where only 26% of Canadians believe that are able to afford a single family home. It now takes 25 years to save up for a down payment on the average home for the average Toronto family. 25 years used to be the time it took to pay off a mortgage. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, it is now more affordable to buy a 20-bedroom castle in Scotland than a 2-bedroom condo in Kitchener. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, a criminal defense lawyer reported on Twitter that numerous of her clients have asked if she could help extend their prison sentences so that they don't have to go and live in the housing market and find a place to rent. In other words, this Prime Minister's housing market is worse than prison by the judgment of several people who actually live in prison. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, we have seniors crammed 16 into a 4-bedroom home in Oshawa. That's according to the food bank, who told me they had to house middle-class seniors together. They're all losing their homes because of this incredible rent increase that this Prime Minister's policies have caused. We have homelessness is skyrocketing across the country. Every town and centre now has homeless encampments. Halifax has 30 homeless encampments, 30 for one medium-sized city. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, who would have imagined that we would have 30 homeless encampments in one city? But that is the misery that he has created through his policies that are not worth the cost of housing. Meanwhile, he makes the problem worse. He gives tax dollars to incompetent mayors and bureaucracies to block home building. The worst incompetence, of course, has been the mayors of Toronto and the former mayor and the present mayor of Toronto, the former mayor of Vancouver, blocking construction in those cities and making it uninhabitable for many of the people who should be able to afford a home. We now have the second slowest building permits of any country in the OECD. That's why we have the fewest homes in the G7, even with the most land by far to build on. And we were told that the media darling Minister of Housing, who was brought in fall, was going to fix all this. He was going to hold photo ops right across the country, and all of a sudden there would be more building. What happened? Housing construction actually went down. 7% reduction in housing last year under the leadership of the current housing minister. But is it any surprise that when you put the guy who destroyed our immigration system in charge of housing, you get a destructive result? And it's not me accusing him of ruining the immigration system. It's his own Liberal successor. The current Liberal Minister of Immigration says the system is out of control. In his own words, he claims that his predecessor was giving study visas for students to come and study at what he calls puppy mills. Those are his terms. I would never have used that term. It's insulting. They're actually human beings. They're not dogs, Madam Speaker. But that's the language we get from the current immigration minister to describe the chaos that his own predecessor caused in the international student program, the temporary foreign worker program, not to mention countless other programs that have been now overwhelmed by fraudsters and shady consultants and bureaucratic incompetence. Now they take the guy who ruined all of that and they say, this is the guy we're going to bring in to resolve the housing crisis. No wonder it gets worse and worse by the day. With their only defense is that they're spending lots of money. Wow. Failing is bad, Madam Speaker. Failing expensively is even worse. And that is what this Prime Minister has done. after 8 years.